بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد سيد البشر وآله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين ومن والاه ومن لم يوالي هذا الرسول فإما أن يترك أو يصمت. This is only used for information purposes. It's not for anyone to basically use for his own gain. We're still explaining the Quran versus people. The Al-Quran يتحدى الناس, and it's still challenging everybody that we are now going to talk about Tom Holland. Remember the previous clip we've talked about John Wansbrough and where he might have taken the idea from Taha Hussein. Why? Because Taha Hussein said Al-Quran, الشعر الجاهلي, is manhul, which is basically he assumed that the poetry was made later on after Al-Ba'th, after the period of the Messenger of God, and it was stuck before the Messenger of God. So this will give the chance to people say maybe the Quran was made way after the 6th century, which is the time of the Messenger of God ﷺ, and people just said, well, that was done before, which is not true. Now this, who basically was alerted to this, it was Mustafa Sadiq al-Rafi'i radiallahu anhu, and he basically answered Taha Hussein. Now a couple of people took these ideas and started basically accumulating. This is how there's nothing genuine in the West. It would have to have sprung from somewhere. And Taha Hussein is a genius, of course, everybody knows this. Unfortunately, he used it against the Quran, where people basically looked at him and said, "No, this is wrong." And now we find Tom Holland takes this idea and he makes it into a documentary. And how does he put it forward? Of course, by the BBC. Tom Holland, unfortunately, as he presents himself to the BBC, he is a scholar. He calls himself a scholar, a historian. He wrote about the history of Rome, so basically he's way up there. We can't basically challenge him because he's actually from Oxford or Cambridge or whatever. The BBC had adopted his, he presented it through BBC. The program is called Islam, the Untold Story. MashaAllah. So there is an untold story. Listen, oh yay Muslims, Isma'u. This is the untold story. We've been living a lie. Imagine this. Wal-'iyadhu billah. Wallahu al-musta'an. So Tom Holland says, well, he's written Roman history, so he accepted the challenge, as if we're telling him, please write about Islam. So this is what I mean by an intellectual war. Two camps, either with or against. If you're with, you will always listen to the Quran and the people who basically, the Muslims, the Al-Azhar al-Sharif. You go to university in Amman, you go to university in Tunisia, in Damascus, in Beirut, whatever. If you're against, you're not going to consult those people and listen to the other camp that says that this is the Quran and says, nah, this is all hogwash, come and listen to us, we have new theories. And this is what's happening, unfortunately, in today's day and age. And this is just an intellectual war. That's all it is. You have the right to say whatever you want to say, but sometimes you offend people. Unfortunately, I've seen that documentary. Missed about 1.5 hours of my life, but it's okay. I had to answer him. I answered him. Actually, he was the most. I've answered him in about 4 pages, from page 59 to 63. 63 and a half. Okay. So they're watching documentary. I see that he first of all starts by going to a university. Big mistake, mate. Big mistake. Goes to university, looks into the library. What are you going to see in the library in London? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And he goes, it's a black hole. It's a black hole. Wallah, it's a black hole. MashaAllah. It's a black hole. There's nothing about Islam. There's nothing about Islam. I want to learn about the culture of Japan. I go to Italy. That's wrong. You want to learn the culture of Islam, you go to Al-Azhar al-Sharif. Doesn't want to go to Al-Azhar al-Sharif. Of course, he will have to go against the Islam and ask all of those people who do not know nothing about Islam. But they have theories. Researchers, looks at it, doesn't find anything, and he says it's a black hole. Anybody who says that he knows anything about the 6th century, which is the year of Sayyidina Rasulullah ﷺ was born and delivered the message, is a lie. You know, that's all a lie. Anyone who says that he knows anything about this is a liar. Wow. Okay. I take that as an insult. Unfortunately, yes, that's an insult. 1,400 years, nothing has been known. He abrogates everything. From Gertrude Bell to Bani Umayyah to Bani al-Abbas, the whole thing, the whole history. And then he travels, goes and sees some Bedouins. Those Bedouins know more about cars and race cars rather than camels or hadith or Quran. Trust me on this. He's going now to see the Bedouins. Those Bedouins go and shop at Harrods, England, London. They've got maybe apartments in Queensway. They've got apartments here in Melbourne. Those Bedouins. Wow. It's like Globe Basha. What did he say? John Globe, when he went to Arabia, he said it's like seeing a community that relates to the Roman Empire. Imagine that has been isolated, but we haven't been isolated. But when he saw the Bedouin, he enjoyed himself. This is like it's like a backpacker going to India, going with Hare Krishna for a while, and then coming back again and putting on the. And he's, I've done my gist, man. It's okay. All right, he's got his experience. Moving on. The documentary goes, and he says basically Roman Empire has a lot of coins, has a lot of ruins everywhere in the Roman Empire. Islam has zero. There's nothing there. There's nothing Islam. There's nothing. 6th century wasn't Islam. This is all written. It's all a lie, basically. Goes and meets a couple of Bedouins. He didn't get anything. Denies the whole Islamic history from At-Tabari. Didn't even read At-Tabari. Didn't read Ibn Kathir. Didn't read Ibn Khaldun. Didn't read Tafsir al-Nasafi, didn't read anything. He takes a copy of the Quran which is translated. Translation of the Quran is not the Quran. You can take it, you can throw it away. It's not the Quran. It's a translation of what it might mean, because everybody has got his own words. Goes on and he sees that the Arab basically falls, and he doesn't even concentrate on the history of Arabic. History of Arabs comes from the Arabic, as they say, isnad, the chain of narration. There's two ways in finding that out. Basically, it falls under two categories as I've written here. The chain of narration known as the hadith. So we want to take a hadith, and if it's sahih, there's a chain of narration that reads to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The other's documentary basically fails to talk about the chain of narration known as the hadith and the Arab historian records. Absolutely nothing. So Tom Holland walks in the imperial city. He goes to Constantinople, Istanbul, and he walks around the Constantinople, the church, I think, or the ruins over there, and walks as if he's so sad. Like, what a pity. Ya li sukhriyati al-qadr, as we say in Arabic. Oh, what a pity. We've lost this. To who? The Muslims. Okay. I don't know who gave him visa, this guy. Then he comes across the Saudi Bedouins. I think it's either Saudi Bedouins or Jordanian Bedouins. Regardless, those Bedouins do not know nothing about Hadith as much as they know about the latest radio and the latest mobile phone, man. So some of them would be on WhatsApp. Or those days there was no WhatsApp. Like he'll be playing Atari maybe those days, more than reading the Quran itself. So he looks at us and he says, nah, there's nothing there. So his conclusion, he's a genius. He's from Oxford, from Cambridge. He knows better. He knows more than all of us Muslims put together. Professor Sayyid Hussein Nasr is a Shia. I think he's a Shia scholar in the Islamic studies in George Washington University. He tells him simply, if you do not believe in anything, it doesn't mean that it's not there, which is very true. Professor Nasser also emphasized on a proverb in Arabic, which is that proverb that I've just said. If it doesn't make it that it's not there. If you say there's no Islam, it doesn't mean that it's not there. If you say that there was no wahi, revelation from Jibril alayhi salam to Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it doesn't mean that it's not there. And then Mr. Holland asked Patricia Crone or Crone, I don't know how to pronounce her name, and she's an Orientalist. I think she's either German or whatever. And then she says basically she has, historically speaking, she can confirm that the Quran came from one person, and that person is Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so she knows that far. She's just a simple. She's not a Muslim. So she's saying, to be fair, one person, and within 23 years. There's your answer. Taking everything, he basically throws everything away, and then he goes and he says that in the Quran Mecca was never mentioned. So now he wants to deny the fact that there's Mecca. Listen to this. This is something people are playing with our history as they please. That's how he thinks. In the Quran, it's وَإِنَّ أَوَّلَ بَيْتٍ وُضِعَ لِلنَّاسِ لَلَّذِي بِبَكَّةَ مُبَارَكًا وَهُدًى لِلنَّاسِ مُبَارَكًا وَهُدًى. I think I remember the ayah. And he says it's not Mecca, it's Becca. So Mecca is definitely not there. Now he's going to look for Mecca. Listen to this. This is where it gets really, really funny. So he wants to go and look and see where Mecca is. Basically, he has a copy of the Quran. What is he reading in the Quran? وَالتِّينِ وَالزَّيْتُونِ وَطُورِ سِنِينَ. Basically, there's figs, there's olives, there's Surah Al-Baqarah, the chapter about the Haifa, the Baqarah. There's no Baqarah, there's no cows in Medina or Mecca or in Saudi Arabia. There's no olives. There's no figs. So it must be from somewhere. So he goes to, I think he goes to Palestine or Israel, and he starts looking around in the same documentary. So now he reckons that we've got it wrong. The West is going to take us من الظلمات إلى النور, from darkness to light. Okay, so he's going to tell us where Mecca is. Okay, show us where Mecca is. So he denies all the fact of the history of Mecca itself. Denies history of Zamzam. Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, leaving also Ismail alayhi salam, leaving also him to Jurhum, learning Arabic, leaving also Jurhum, from Jurhum to Bani Khuza'a, from the whole thing. He denies Mecca ever existing. This is the thing. So he's going around. So where did Bani Umayyah then come from? So he wants to place Bani Umayyah somewhere else. So Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan and all they weren't there. So he denies that there was Sayyidina Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, Sayyidina Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan. He agrees that these characters do exist, but they're not there. So where are they? He wants to put them in Sham, in the Levant, which is somewhere near Palestine, Jordan, or Syria, or Lebanon, somewhere there. Basically, he shattered all this as a theory. We're following a theory. Wrong. Okay. Obscurity widens in the documentary, so he wants to tell us that it's all made up by the Arabs. So he goes into how we came to a different conclusion. Well, they said it's an oral history. Oral history is basically the Arabs choose what fits them, and it goes on. There's one mistake here. When the fitna happened, which is the first civil disobedience, Sayyidina Muawiyah ibn Sufyan was on one side, Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib was on the other side. The absolute, if we wrote the Quran, and if the Quran is made up, why wasn't there two Qurans? A Quran could have been a version of Bani Hashim, who was with Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, and another Quran with Bani Umayyah. But that never happened. So the whole thing goes around Abdul Malik bin Marwan and the civil war with who? With Abdullah bin Zubayr. He's going to reach there eventually. So this is what he's telling us. So he denies the fact that there was even anything of Al-Yamama and Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Hurub al-Rida, the whole thing. He abrogates the whole thing. And he says, well, there was only and he goes and asks another two, Professor Guy Stromsa of the Abrahamic Religion University of Oxford, confirms this event that basically they reached Jerusalem and there was only a few nomads, Arabs, poor Arabs. They just came from the desert. Maybe they wanted some water, whatever, and they took them in as, an act of courtesy. Professor Fred Donner of Near Eastern History of the University of Chicago also confirms the event, that there was no such thing, no mention of Islam. So those are Arabs who came with no Islam. There was no Quran. So he denied the fact. What about Surah Muhammad? There's also a lot of things I want to mention here on the second page, but I'll come to it and I'll read it from the Quran anyway. So both of them confirm. So there's no Muawiyah ibn Sufyan, there is no Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, there's no Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab, that everybody knows his history. Even there was no Shia those days. Everybody was on Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah those days. There was no Wahhabi, no Salafi, no Shia, no Zaydi, nothing. One unit, one Islamic nation under Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab. Everybody was under Ni'al Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu wa arda. So the chain of leaders of Yazid bin Abi Sufyan, when just after they captured Jerusalem and they made the treaty with the Christians there and the Romans were sacked out. They fell under a plague, Imwas, and the chain was very well known in history. Even it went from Yazid bin Abi Sufyan, which is the brother of Sayyidina Muawiyah bin Muslim. They used to call him Yazid al-Khair, which is his brother, and then it went to Sayyidina Amr bin al-As, where he took them to the mountains. There are a lot of mountains near Amman, near Damascus, near Jerusalem. So he took them from the Wadi, which is basically the valleys, to the mountains to save them from the plague, and it worked. Subhanallah. Adding more insult to injury, Holland's basically hold the Quran, and he says, well, the patriarch of the three religions, Maqamu Ibrahim, is not the one in Mecca. Remember, in the Quran it says Maqamu Ibrahim. So he says, no, it's not in Mecca, it's Hebron al-Khalil. So and he shows us the photos that this is Maqam Ibrahim, the masjid where Sayyidina Ibrahim is, and that's where they are. So it's there, it's not Mecca. It has nothing to do with Maqam Ibrahim over there. But we have Maqam Ibrahim beside what? Beside Al-Kaaba. Doesn't mention that. He said, no, that's all fabricated. Okay. So today in the state of Israel, instead of going to Amman or going to Cairo and which is two cities where he could get an abundance of information, he refused all that, and he went to Israel, and he went and he met a couple of people over there and told them, yes, Mr. Holland, you were actually right. There was no such thing as Islam. There was no such thing as Arab. That's all. Dr. Tali Erickson Guinea, working for the Israeli Antiquities, takes Holland to on the ground. They're archaeologists, so they're looking for some ruins or whatever. He takes him to some marking that looks like a mosque, and they confirm it's a mosque, and it was facing east. So they say, there you go, that's the mosque. Maybe this was Mecca, or maybe this was Medina, I don't know. And they confirm this is Mecca. It's somewhere, I think, either in the southern part in the Negev desert in Palestine, or maybe in Jordan. So maybe we should call again the embassy in Jordan and tell them, guess what, Mecca was there, man. They'll laugh at you. Wallahi, they'll laugh at you. By the God of Kaaba, they'll laugh at you. So mentioning of olives and everything, so he confirms that it was somewhere maybe in Palestine, the Holy Land. So he starts looking for Mecca there. All right. Mentions of Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam and the Qawm Lut and what happened. Good. Ghadabullah, the wrath of Allah fell on those people. It must be there. So he abrogates Al-Hijaz completely. At the very end, he finds a small town that they call, and I have to find it really fast. So mention of livestock, mention of everything. So he will have to look for these things in somewhere in Palestine, which is now Israel, and Israeli archaeologists. So takes him and he tells him, well, this is the city of Avdat, Avdat. So Google that and see what it's all about. It's got it has both heritage of Roman and Egyptian. It's got some oxens and whatever. It was maybe one day Muslim, one day Kafir, who knows. So he says that's the one, and then he goes and continues on. He gets a coin and he says, there it is. That's in London. It's written Muhammad, abrogating that Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab, he used to take the coin, and he used to, in my book I've got also photos of these coins, he used to stamp on them according to their weight, to see that they're actually jayyid, which means they're good to use. So that was something really, really good. Basically, Islam, Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab has stabilized and basically standardized everything, either coins or non-coins. He was the one who basically stabilized the economy. So he takes that coin that had that's been stamped as Muhammad because Abdullah bin Zubayr stamped it as Muhammad. I've got some coins on 452, and I've got them in my collection. So these are the first one is the Umayyad coin. This one here was a Khusra, was Kisra al-Mushwa. It's basically Persian coins, and Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab used to stamp them when he used to weigh them. So he finds another coin and he says, well, this is the first mention of Sayyidina Muhammad. Okay, I'm gonna have to take this Quran and tell you, but he says there was no Quran. There was no Quran. This is a very important message here. He abrogated the Quran. So in Surah Ali Imran, We all know وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ. There's, I don't want to continue anymore. وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ. That Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a messenger of God. There's Ali Imran, there's the first smoking gun. And we go even Surah Al-Ahzab, ما كان على نبي حج. Oh, sorry. There's also mention of Sayyidina Muhammad here. ما كان محمد أبا أحد. So Muhammad is also not the father of anyone. There's another mention of Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. There's also another mention over here at the end of Surah Al-Fath, Muhammadun Rasulullah. There you go, Muhammadun Rasulullah. So even if we say La ilaha illallah, Muhammadun Rasulullah is mentioned in the Quran itself anyway. And at the end, this is the smoking gun that he's got everything. We know Surah Muhammad, but then we over here, it is mentioned that Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam says also مبشرا. Basically it's a good omen. He's telling us that there is مبشرا برسول يأتي من بعدي اسمه أحمد. Okay, I'll tell you one thing. There's a huge difference between mentioning Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and then Ahmad. There is a great confirmation that the person is one, not that he's two, or not that he never actually was mentioned. Because you say his name is Muhammad, and by the way, there will be, and another fellow says there will be someone coming, his name is Ahmad, and then another one says is Muhammad. You're talking about the same person. Even if you go to the old chronicles and the Apocrypha, the Christian Apocrypha, you will find his name was something else too, but it was also confirming Sayyidina Rasulullah. Anyway, moving along. So he abrogates all this. There was no Quran, there was no Mecca. Cool. We're living a lie. Wal-'iyadhu billah. Wallahu al-musta'an. Despite all these clues, Tom Holland doesn't go to Al-Azhar al-Sharif when he doesn't go to where? To Amman. He chooses not to go anywhere. However, between the Umayyad and the Hijaz, Abdullah bin Zubayr basically went against Abdul Malik bin Marwan, and now he grabs the opportunity, just like John Wansbrough, and says that it must have been happening there, and he grabs the opportunity. He doesn't know about Taha Hussein. He's not that intellect to know about Taha Hussein, but John Wansbrough does know, because he's an Orientalist. So then he grabs the opportunity and says everything was forged to that period, including what? Al-Shi'r al-Jahili, poetry that was before Islam, before Sayyidina Rasulullah, we called Shi'r al-Jahili. So he said if the Quran was written in Abdul Malik bin Marwan's era, then it was basically Abdul Malik bin Marwan who went and made up Mecca, and made up the Quran, and made up the name Muhammad. Imagine all this. That's all in his head. He's a genius, this guy. He's a genius, but I'm using it lightly. He's a genius. He thinks he's a genius. Like he can. We are 1.6 billion people on Earth, man. Are you really serious that we lived a lie? Get real. Despite all this history and the mintage and he just takes that coin and he runs with it as that's the smoking gun. And Mecca was not there, and it was made up by Abdul Malik bin Marwan and all that. It's basically it's highly offensive. He even has an interview at the Christopher Hitchinson de-radicalizing Muhammad. I mean, that I'll find it, and I've written over here actually, seriously, about a lot of things that I couldn't actually write because there are so many I cannot hear. Unfortunately, I cannot repeat some of the insults on the Prophet ﷺ in these pages due to respect for Rasulullah ﷺ. I can't basically write down because that will be looking like insults. But there has been a lot of controversies from the West and from even Munafiqeen Arab who are basically left Islam, and they're actually trying to put their two bumps worth. And some of us Muslims, we cannot write these things because it's also insulting. But we will say this is the thing that's been said, and their theory, they're trying to put that theory forward. Unfortunately, the more we have these universities, because our standard of universities are different from Oxford and Cambridge, our universities fall on faith. They fall on al-Iman. So if you say, well, is the Al-Azhar University overseas? It's not treated as a university. Why? Because يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر, and they يشهدون أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله. So basically, we cannot, regardless of what we do, We will never reach their standard. Their standard, you'll have to throw away faith and go into science. We can't do that. Even Carl Sagan said, if you want to say there's no God, you'll have to bring an irrefutable evidence that there's no God. No one could do that. Now, Tom Holland failed. He failed miserably, because that is not an irrefutable evidence, by the way. You failed, but you have a fan base to basically people who hate Islam, or they just do not like Islam or dislike it, whatever. They're following that second opinion, and that will keep on growing. There's budgets. BBC is showing this. Of course, it's shown everywhere in the world. I've seen it on YouTube, and it was given for free. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمك ويكافئ ذي والله المستعان، والله دائما وأبدا المستعان.